Well, today we have Adriaan Groenewald, and he's a leadership activist and author, and has had many, many dialogues and interviews with many leaders and experts on the subject of leadership. And I'm really happy to see you today, and thanks for your time. And I was so interested. I saw a couple of your videos on your channel, and I thought somebody like you who has had so much insight into this topic, it would be so interesting to hear from you what you see as trends, as principles, as topics which come up in your conversations over and over again, and where you see the subject of leadership going, or where is it heading? Is it heading anywhere, or are we just treading water all the time and giving out the same messages about what it means to have good, authentic leadership, or is there something new on the horizon? So thanks, Adriaan.
So, thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect. I really appreciate it, Luke. Appreciate it. And I'm happy to just share what, where my thinking is going and where I think some trends are going, and kind of give my bold views towards the end of our conversation, perhaps. But certainly I do a lot of reflecting, writing, discussing, having conversations. Have been doing it for about 20 years, more than 20 years maybe, with leaders often across the world. And it's been an interesting journey in terms of the intensity. So if you've done it over the last 20 years, you can start feeling something happening over the last 6 months with the coronavirus, for example. What's in the air?
Mm-hmm.
How different are the interviews now versus a year ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago? And this kind of conversation helps me reflect on that, which I appreciate.
What do you think is so? What comes to the forefront within the crisis? What do leaders think about when they now have to lead through this crisis or in this crisis situation? What are the topics which come up the most?
There are the obvious ones. The need for constant communication. That comes up very strongly, and leaders are finding that they are strange enough more accessible, because organizing a Zoom session very quickly is very doable. They don't have to travel, and their diaries are as full as always, if not fuller. But they find that there is a sense of accessibility. Some of them are very frustrated with the electronic medium, but understand it's a temporary thing, but it will become part of their lives as well. There's a strong trust element, almost a surprise for many of the leaders, where they've had to overnight trust all their employees, when in some cases they had to organize within days, overnight, a week, for all their employees to work from home, from their homes, where babies are, where vacuum cleaners are run, where things happen, and wondering whether their employees will rise to the occasion, and finding that they do. That within this crisis happening, the employees realize the need for stepping it up, for being their best selves, for holding on dearly to what they have, because they see companies crumble around them, they see economies going down, they see people dying, they see a lot of unsurety, and then they just rise to the occasion, and something inside human beings, which I call their best selves, surface. So trust, the fact that they've had to, because a lot of leaders just don't trust their people. Politicians certainly don't trust their people sufficiently in most countries, and CEOs of major organizations and small organizations sometimes also don't, and they've been forced to do that, Luke. And people show when you trust them in general. You've got the small percentage who don't, but it's the minority. So that's something that's come up very, very, very key. Another one is personal accountability. So when ultimately I have to self-isolate, I have to self-awake, I have to self-motivate, I have to self-teach my kids, I have to wash my own hands, look after my own health, be responsible. Those things were always important probably, but suddenly it's right here in my home, and therefore I'm more accountable to myself, to my family, to my employees, my boss, my work, my business. that personal accountability, a lot of leaders are not catching on to the fact that, how do I leverage that? The fact that people are feeling more than ever before personally accountable, that they are being trusted forcefully in some cases not, and they are rising to the occasion. How do I leverage that as a leader? Now I can go back to the way we always did it, back to the office where you feel like you have to be there at a certain time and leave at a certain time. In fact, if I leave later, I look like I'm doing more. And I can do play all those little political, egotistical games, or we can get real. Yeah, we can get real. I'll do my thing, you do your thing. I'm as important to the business as the business is to me. It's not like you're more important than I am. So there's an incredible authenticity creeping into the system. Not, unfortunately, in my view, political leadership versus citizenry. There I see a bigger divorce, because the political leaders seem to be shown up. They're more visible, and they're showing their weakness. The fact that the political system is driven on ego. It's driven on the opposite of authentic, where I just say what sounds good and what gets me votes. And therefore political leaders, they haven't acquired this authentic muscle, this authentic me, who I really am necessarily. I'm not saying all of them, but collectively speaking. So that trust relationship, I don't see that improving so much as the corporate organizational, we've got to survive relationship. So, I mean, those are a few themes. There are more, but those are powerful ones. Trust, accountability, authenticity coming into the system to a large degree. Leaders are talking to their people from their own homes, not from their fancy offices, big boardroom tables where they always sit in the same seat. I know a lot of leaders are not like that, where they pull into the parking lot with the fanciest and most expensive car. Most leaders are not necessarily doing that, or a lot of leaders are not doing that, but a lot of them are. So they get out of their fancy car, they walk everywhere where everyone can see them. There's a certain aura around your fancy offices. I don't have that now. I'm just accessible. You want to see me? You want to chat? Let's have a Zoom. Let's engage. And things have equalized a lot. So how are we leveraging this? Darn it! If we're just going to let slip on this, then we will have missed a wonderful opportunity.
That's amazing, since what you're describing seems to be a development across many different kinds of businesses. I mean, you're speaking from a perspective of having talked to many CEOs in many different companies, not just one company where you could say, I observed that in a single company, but you observe that throughout all your conversations with many, many business leaders. And I've heard the trust issue also emerge here in Germany, talking about corporate leadership, that suddenly trust is becoming an issue. And you're adding on to that personal accountability. So that seems to be very encouraging, that there seems to be a cultural shift. Or would you describe this as a cultural shift, and induced by a crisis and also induced by the technology? And do you think it's here to stay, or do you think it'll go away once the crisis is gone, back to business, back to the old hierarchies and status symbols? And or do you think there will be something learned from this which will change corporate culture in general?
Yeah, so as we know, culture is the way things are done around here. It's sort of just a natural, instinctive way that we do things. And I don't think this is culture yet. I think we have a great opportunity to turn a lot of these positive trends into culture. And some companies, organizations already had those elements as culture, and they are surviving this much more effectively and successfully than others. And others are needing to acquire it very quickly, or are strengthening these trends, trust, accountability, and those sort of things. Our challenge is, so let me first say, if we're not consciously going to highlight these emerging trends, then we won't be able to turn it into just corporate, national, international cultures. Okay, we're not going to be able to do that, because the past is so long. We are decades of the past, and that will be a heavy weight. It'll drag us back down. But I think the really sharp leaders, the authentic leaders, the wise ones, will catch on. I know that a lot of them are seriously pondering and thinking and counseling and discussing and debating how they can leverage this in all spheres. So we will not be the same. Things will not be the same. A lot of things will change. for good and for bad. And I certainly hope that on the leadership front, there will be more authentic leaders emerging because of this crisis. My concern is the political sphere, which has a huge influence on our organizational spheres. I have the big concern of practical fallout from all of this in the corporate environment is big. Retrenchments. The other trend, by the way, is the incredible pressure on the individual. So if you think of that long list from the top of pressures that are coming down, global pressure, health pressure, economic, social, coming down into the national psyche, pushing down into organizational, into family, and eventually it settles on my shoulders as an individual. Is my foundation as a human being strong enough to absorb, handle this incredible pressure that's coming down on me financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, health-wise? So are leaders going to catch the vision of how do I support Luke, one of the people in my organization, to have a strong foundation, a strong anchor, so that he can ultimately absorb this pressure that lands on me finally, that he can do that? Are leaders cottoning on to that? So back to your question, this culture thing, I'm concerned on the political side, more than corporate and organizational, that those leaders, something is going to become obsolete there. That void, authentic leadership in the political realm. Are you there?
I'm still
checking the signal.
I'm still there. I can hear your audio. Sometimes your video is freezing, but I hear you on the political leadership. Yeah.
Here we go.
So you were just
checking with Zoom, as we know.
Yeah, it was somehow there was some video problems. You were just talking about the political leadership, and I find it also interesting that you also look at leadership in the political sphere and talk to a lot of politicians and have a lot of insight there as well. I think some other colleagues who work within leadership sort of shy away from that. They focus on the organizational leadership, but you do both. And you said you see a distinct difference there. You still see within political leadership a strong mistrust towards the citizenry to act responsibly within this crisis. And I assume you mean also that this entails a lot of regulation, a lot of oversight in terms of how does the citizen really behave within this crisis? Is he or she doing the right thing? Can we really trust them to do the right thing? Why is that? Why do you think there is this mistrust? And again, I have to emphasize that you talk to a lot of people, not just one or two politicians, but several, and you observe the whole field. Why do you think is that?
Yeah, I have over the years certainly tried to expand my engaging of leaders across sporting coaches, to corporate, to social leaders, social activists out there, and influencers, and also political leaders. And there's definitely, for years now, I would say decades, there's been a mistrust, a huge trust deficit between citizens and politicians. And there are pockets of excellence. And recently I've seen some indications of women leaders running countries and how coronavirus versus men leaders. And of course, one can't make that general assumption or conclusion, but it certainly shows something. But what I would say to you is that distrust, that deficit, is so huge, Luke, and it has been. So it was always going to be the case that in general politicians will fail in terms of having the trust of their citizens in how they deal with this unprecedented pandemic. Now, in our country, for example, South Africa, our president kicked off very well, and I had great hopes, and I did little polls on Twitter in the beginning stages, middle, and now recently, and it's a huge drop. It's a solid drop, in terms of how he started and his initial assertive reaction, proactive reaction, and people feeling, well, that's wonderful, and then suddenly that just went down, partly because the structures under him are so bureaucratic and so corrupt and so unworthy of being leaders in many cases, that no matter how authentic he may have tried to be, or he may be, It just couldn't result in practical action and movement. And leaders are in the business of movement. So if for decades and years and centuries, maybe politicians have made promise after promise after promise just to get elected, and then when they're in power, they don't deliver, they don't deliver, they don't deliver. Please, it's just not possible. It's impossible for citizens to trust them. And you cannot lead authentically if there's no trust. So we shouldn't be surprised, and it won't get any better unless there's huge shakeups in politics, unless we somehow start voting in leaders that are authentic and real. And a lot of these political leaders have never really gone through leadership training. Now, I'm some kind of proponent of leadership training, less and less so, I'll be honest, and towards the end, I'll share with you my thinking. But, a lot of them have gone through the whole activistic movement of getting to the top somehow. And we talk about personality cults and personality politics, and it's all about popularity and all those superficial egotistical things. So there's huge gaps. We can talk about that for hours as to why politicians are not successfully leading, collectively speaking, not individually. In corporate, you tend to be refined, and you have coaches and you have leadership training, and you become interested in leadership. There's something that money is invested in refining leaders to some degree. Even there, I think we're way behind. We're so behind in terms of preparing our leaders for this pandemic and many other crises to come. But we have a big problem in the political sphere, I think. And those leaders are often not humble enough to have leadership advisors to do anything to improve themselves. It's just filled with ego.
So what you're saying is that this erosion of trust is something which was going on for the last decade, let's say, and the crisis just shows us how deeply that divide has been entrenched within that time between politicians and citizens. And one of the problems is that politicians have forgotten how to be authentic, or how to display something where people can really believe that's what they really want, that's who they really are, and they're not just going to change their mind or their agenda 1 year down the road once elections have been done, and suddenly they change their mind and do a totally different agenda. So that's what I'm getting from you. Is there? But you said there's also some hope on the horizon in terms of how leadership could be developed. Although you had this caveat about that you have also some doubts about leadership training. Can you enlighten me a little bit about your personal journey, how you see leadership, and do we even have hope in developing that particular quality? Because also this landscape is very diverse, and even the term is very contentious. It's seen very differently from different people. Where do you think we stand now? Did we make any progress in the field? How do we understand leadership? Can it actually be learned, or is it just a natural qualifications? What's your opinion?
Yeah, somewhere we're going to have to, and I've met a few people like yourself and others across the globe that are very concerned about the fact that we don't really define leadership in the same way across the planet. I mean, what people's views are of leadership and what it should look like, and the definition of authentic leadership is so different across different spectrums. But let me tell you, let me put it out there where I am right now, and I am getting a bit tired of platitudes of a great leader is this, a great leader is that. If you had to call people into a room and say, let's put on this whiteboard what a great leader looks like. And I did this 10 years ago already with leaders. And then they would say, great communicator, there's this, and there's these incredible lists. And when you finish that, you say, wow, that looks to me like a perfect human being. And none of us are perfect. None of us will ever be perfect. None of us can be perfect. So I'm tired of those platitudes. I think there are two things that matter hugely if you want to be the best possible leader in today's world. The first one is authentically and passionately, you have to strive to understand your technical field and competence the best you possibly can. And I'm not saying that I must be the best in my industry. I'm not saying compete with the rest of the world, sort of the American way, be the best at what you're doing compared with others. You be the best you can be. So if I'm an accountant, I must be the best accountant I possibly can and understand the field of accountancy. If I'm an engineer, same thing. If I'm a manager, if I'm a salesman, doesn't matter what, or a teacher. If I'm the best at that and I'm passionate about it, that already takes you into leadership positions. Okay, that makes you stand out. It makes you get promoted. It puts you into spaces where you now have to deal with human beings and go beyond just your technical expertise. And that's fine. But if you don't work on point 2 passionately, equally passionately, and it doesn't become your key project in your life, then you find now I'm engaging human beings. And suddenly these relationships are backfiring. And why are they backfiring? Because I didn't, point number 2, I did not passionately seek to understand me. I did not passionately seek to get to know myself authentically and intensely. I did not make me the main project because I lead. I did not understand and buy into my own values. I did not build my own foundation strong enough. I actually don't know the authentic me. I haven't discovered the real me. And that's not just strengths and weaknesses and all the superficial things and the analysis we do and the assessments and the psychometric tests. All those things help. But I've got to honestly discover who I am. And as I make myself a project of refining as a human being, spiritually, emotionally, physically, intellectually, and I honestly try to be the best me, the best version of me when I discover who that is. Combine those two. Combine me being my best self with technically being exceptionally competent in what I'm doing, and suddenly you find a very balanced human being who has credibility because of his or her expertise, who is comfortable within his or her own skin, who does not compete with other human beings and realizes they also have great potential. If I can get their best selves to the surface, then they too will stand out and be happy and successful. So we find too many people have depended on the first point, and not the second one. So that's what I'm putting out there. So leadership development, finally, if I can say, there's lots of things you can teach leaders. But technically competent, we've got to find a way of lifting our game, Luke, in helping leaders truly find themselves and remain true to themselves. Find their authentic me, their best self, and remain true to that person through thick and thin. And if we do that at the deepest possible level, then their roots will be strong enough so that when the winds blow, they won't fall. Foundation will be strong enough so that when the pressures come down on them, they will not crumble, and they'll lead authentically.
And how could this be done in a field like politics, where it seems to be a lot about power and not so much about purpose anymore? Let me put it this way. So that takes, and of course, politics means how to say it, how to gain power. Basically, that's the whole point, without violence. And the question is, can you remain authentic in that sort of situation where it seems more like a shark eats shark environment, and where sometimes authentic people have a difficult time because every word they say they get measured against, and one false step and basically you're gone. How do we get to a point where politicians can be more authentic and can be more a person than just an image or a persona of a perfect politician, just like this image, as you saw on the whiteboard, of the perfect human being? All that doesn't exist, but there seems to be this desire to embody that, and there seems to be also desire by the citizens to see that kind of image. How do we get away from that and accept that politicians are also human beings, and it's maybe better for all of us to accept them as authentic and not just as an image of a politician? Many questions, I know, but perhaps you have an answer.
Yeah, and there's no real answer. I mean, because the answer remains the same. The answer is, firstly, let me say that I think there are political leaders or leaders who strive to want to be like we're talking about here. Okay, so, but there's something that happens if your anchor isn't strong and it's sunk deep, or your roots aren't deep, deep, deep in terms of who I am and what matters most to me spiritually and values-wise and everything else. When you're offered or voted into incredible power, that title of president of country changes you. I can tell you, I can give you 100 reasons why. It absolutely changes you as a human being, because you start feeling you can't trust people around you. Everyone else wants that position. You've got power mongers around you. You've got unauthentic agendas. You've got some around you, and so much corruption and whatever else you want to call it, that it eventually changes you. You stop having a sense of humor. You become more distrusting. It's a difficult place to remain your true self if you aren't already in that position where you know who you are. So, but let me first say, I think there are leaders like that, and certainly leaders whose intention is to remain authentic and to be good human beings. I think they do exist, but not nearly enough. How are we going to get there? The only way we can get there is to find those individuals that are super passionate about being great at politics, understanding the technical environment of being a great politician, individuals who are humble enough to accept that they have to work hard on themselves, that they have to refine who they are and understand their best selves. So I can't change you, you can't change me if I don't want to. So how do I get leaders, how do I get it to land? How do we get it to land? That if you want to be the greatest leader today, in 2020 onwards, it lies within. It is in there. And it's not on the program that you're going on. And those things can all help me, but it lies in there, look. And if I'm not going to realize that and discover it, then it's never going to happen. I can't force you. I can, if you have a near-death experience or something or some traumatic experience in your life, then maybe you become humble enough to want to change as a human being. Those things happen. But it starts with me. Do I want to change? Do I want to be a better human being? Do I want to be the best possible leader? And here's a logical reason why. You're so visible. Every human being on this planet is a reporter now. People know your thoughts, man. People really know you because you are so visible as a leader. So if you're not super authentic, aligned in your beliefs and your inside versus what you do outside, versus your actions and your visible things that you do, behavior, then you're always going to be caught out. And even if you are super authentic inside, outside, sometimes your behavior is not going to match exactly who you know you are. And if that happens, you're authentic enough to apologize, to correct, to be humble enough to say, I'll change, or I'm sorry. So leaders must realize that, and they are bumping their heads. They are finding out the hard way that they're not authentic enough, and that they are being caught out over and over and over. And I'm hoping that somehow creates a collective desire to work harder on discovering the self. And let me just say one more thing. I know I'm talking a lot, but I will look at a senior leader in the eye and say, "Who are you?" And then it's almost, whoa, no one has really asked me that question the way you're asking. And I'll say, okay, who are you really? And then I'll start now explain first with the first question, who are you? I'll explain who they are and so on. I'll kind of get where I'm going, and then I'll try and go deeper. And then I'll say, okay, interesting. So tell me, who are you really? What do you mean, who am I really? Who are you spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, physically? Let's go deeper. Very often we haven't been taught in school, we haven't been asked the right questions so that I can discover who I am. We haven't. And we're so busy teaching intellectual how to speak different languages and do mathematics and history and geography and all those things in school, that we forget that the most important skill and the most important thing that we need to learn is, who am I? And before I know it, life takes its course. And guess what, Luke? Life is more busy now than ever before. It's going to get busier, more pressure. As I said, from top down, there's going to be more visibility, more information. just a busier world. It's going to suck people in. And if they don't find themselves, they will never find themselves. The world is not going to give it to them on a platter.
I think that's a really important message to hear. And what I find so interesting now is that somehow within the world of organizations and organizational leadership, there is this understanding that, yes, this is part of the process. Let's say part of a coaching process or self-development process and all that. Somehow, maybe not with everybody, but once you get into it, you understand it has to do something with me. It's not so much about them, it's more about me. And I have to start understanding myself. I have to start to introspect. It's a little bit what you said in the beginning, that those organizations who start to introspect and start to understand that trust and individual responsibility is now the key to move forward, they might have a chance to stabilize that if they become aware of it, make it conscious, right? And it's the same about the individual development. If you start making that conscious, you can start, standing on it. Now, what's new to me is this thought that this would be also good for political leadership to start looking at themselves as individuals. I'm not in that sphere, and that's why I'd never heard of it, but it seems to be something, a new kind of thinking about politics and politicians. Do you see already some developments along those lines, or do you see this as a future field where politicians will start to do some self-examination and start to think about authenticity more as they move up the political ladder, let's say it that way? Is this a future field of personal development?
So I'm hoping that we will see a trend where that happens more. I'm not too hopeful. I think there will be pockets of excellence where certain leaders will realize they've got to delve deep into themselves. And if they think they've done it, they must do it deeper, I'm afraid. We've all got to go deeper right now, because those roots must be deeper. The winds are blowing harder than ever before. The storms are more fierce than ever before. So our anchor must be stronger. And as I said, the pressure is coming down on the individual shoulders more than ever before. So I've got to have a stronger foundation. So if you think you had strong, all of that, then you have to do more. I almost feel that if politicians don't wake up fast enough, Luke, that society will replace them. And I don't know how. We will find systems and ways and means of leading our societies without politicians. They will become obsolete as we know it. It's happening already. You have people marching on every continent of the planet. People are connected, so they can mobilize. And so political leaders are being wiped out in a way as we speak. Physically, certainly the emotional attachment and the systemic need for them will become obsolete or will be challenged severely. And the only way is for them to honestly go inside and say, I've got to be a real human being. I'm afraid that the system may be so distrusting that even when I'm real and authentic, people don't trust you. They don't trust that when you say, believe me, when I say to you, I'm working on this. And I heard one of the top politicians in our country trying to speak to a news anchor, saying how the ANC has now come with a plan and steps on how to curb corruption. And he wouldn't take it. He wouldn't take it. And I was so impressed, because he said, why on earth would we believe you now? You have been in power for so long. You've done nothing except enrich yourselves. You've this and this, and I'm just going verbatim. And he pushed back, and the guy said, no, now's the time to hold hands and let's trust each other and let's work together. He said, no. You've had your chance. You've had your chance. You've messed it up. You've messed up our country. Now, why would we keep trusting you? Now, that is going to happen more and more. And that politician actually had nothing to say. All he could say is, you're right. I understand where you're coming from, but. So we're not going to fall for that nonsense anymore. You must be real. So every president, every top politician should have a leadership advisor. And not the normal coach. I'm not talking about executive coaches. I'm talking about people who will absolutely help that leader understand who they are and have them actually change inside, really change, not act like they've changed. Politicians have become actors. They say what they think people want to hear so that they can get votes, and it's become so part of the genetics that I don't think they know who they are, like some top actors don't know who they are anymore. So before I get too emotional about it, I think the world is going to force politicians to adopt these things we're talking about. Some leaders think when they're at the top, they can stop refining themselves as leaders and as human beings because I've arrived. So now, I'm it. No, you're never it. You will be released. Who are you then? The only leadership positions you're not released from is parent, mother, father. The rest almost we're released from. So don't attach your ego or your self-esteem or your being, who you are, to your title, to your position, ever. Find out who you are, and that's what your anchor is. That's what you hold on to.
It's really so interesting that we're having this conversation, because I don't think a lot of people who are working on leadership out there really take the step which you have been taking to look also at political leadership in this way, and also see these consequences and say that is one of the core problems. And why should it even be different in the political field when we talk about leadership? Why do our politicians or leaders in the political field exempt from leadership principles, which of course they aren't? And you're absolutely right to criticize that and to demand that they start working on this and working on themselves. So just because we've already talked about the future, what thoughts do you have about the future when it comes to leadership? Obviously, you're already pointing towards political leadership as one of those future fields where you see something needs to be done there, and you're making an extremely strong case for that. Is there anything else where what you see emerging in the future where you say, either in academia, in education, in technology, in systems and structures? I mean, the field is very broad. You said you've been working in this on several levels in the last 10 years. Where do you think the topic of leadership is heading? What's it going to be like, and what do you see coming out of this?
Yeah, I'm hoping, and what I think is going to happen is we'll become more laser precision. We'll become more precise in how we actually develop leaders. In fact, I almost want to say we have to start canning the word leadership development. Okay. If we shook the tree a bit and said, no, let's get rid of some of the words that we keep using, and that actually creates barriers to drop. People just tune out when you start talking about leadership development, because we don't really believe it's going to make a difference. And billions have been sunk into it, and look where the world is. Billions of dollars are sunk into it every year, and look where the world is. And leaders have to take the blame for where it is. And maybe the leadership development industry has to take some blame for where it is. But of course, you can only take so much, So I think, Luke, that in a way we almost have to can leadership development. We have to get to a point where we raise the whole bar of thinking and leading. So our thinking as leaders must be raised, and how we lead and how we see leadership, namely personal development and technical functional development, and bring those two together. We've got to take our thinking and leading to another level. And I would be amiss if I didn't say that's why we very ambitiously, but not nearly as successfully as I want to, launched ThinkLead. So it's an app that helps leaders think and lead on a whole new level. And it's just the first rollout. But in the next few years, we want millions of leaders on ThinkLead, where we can share thinking, this kind of thinking, where we can share leading, where we can change our habits, because on our ThinkLead platform, there's a personal leadership development plan. There's an I lead component. How do I lead from where I stand? There's a we lead component, where we have forums where we talk as organizations, as a society, as teams about leadership and leadership related issues. So there's this we lead forum section. There's a I learn, or I learn section. How do I learn to be a leader? So it's an expansion of leadership content, everything leadership, videos, audios, articles, all of that will migrate towards the platform. We've got global contributors on the platform that we're slowly inviting. So it's the beginning stages, but we created ThinkLead so that we can help leaders think and lead on a whole new level and learn how to lead. So if we can raise the leadership conversation, focused leadership conversation by 1% globally, if we can raise the leadership awareness of exactly what matters now. 1%, 3%. Collectively, I think we might start gaining momentum in how we lead. I think where it should be going, therefore, that laser of where training should happen, for example, is on the individual, is to absolutely learn to ask the right questions. A lot of my leadership interviews, I did one with Gordana Bernat the other day, Angelique de Toy happens to be ladies, and a couple of others in Italy, in Sweden, on how do you discover yourself. So a lot of my interviews, although I see myself as someone in the leadership space, is about helping leaders discover themselves and become more authentic. I can't help them become better engineers and better managers necessarily, but maybe we can through conversation. And we're expanding ThinkLead to Think Me. So where you join not a leadership ecosystem only, but a Think Me ecosystem where you start discovering me. So those are the trends and the future. We've got to do things differently if we want different results. We can't keep doing it the same. I can tell you this, the leadership development industry, collectively speaking, has been shaken badly. I know lots of people who have no contracts. It's all been halted, and they're struggling to get back online. And they think all they have to do is the same, just online instead of classroom. No, you have to do something differently now. You know, the whole industry is shaken up, and that's good. But we are where we are because of bad leadership, and therefore leadership development must lift its game. And I hope some of what I say land, but you know, obviously I don't have all the answers, and these are just some of my opinions, and I continue to search for where this is all going.
I would call this also an appeal towards self-discovery, and perhaps to say, and I agree with this perspective that even the term leadership and leadership development has somehow been corrupted in itself, and there is too much baggage in that term, and a lot of people seem also to misunderstand it. They immediately say, oh, that's about power, so no, I don't want to know anything about that if I'm not in this position, right? So there seems to be something even about the term which is slightly, which doesn't seem to serve its actual purpose. And to say think me and think lead, I think is showing actually, yeah, this is more about a journey of self-discovery, which will serve you and serve the people who you are serving in effect. So somehow we have to, yeah, as you say, even think about new ways of thinking, of communicating, of involving people in that journey of self-discovery, which will help each individual know who they are and what they
Look,
are
if I
supposed to
can
do.
say,
Yeah, sorry.
if I can say maybe as a conclusion is, you know, there's no more new countries like Cortez and all these voyages. There's no more countries to discover. Okay? There's no more, maybe we'll now gaze up in the skies and try and discover planets, sure, if we have the money to even try and do that as a globe, you know, as countries. But that voyage inside. So I think there's huge discovery in every individual because a human being's potential is infinite. I think it extends beyond life, beyond death. Okay, that's a whole new discussion. But there's something infinite inside every human being, and we've been going on these voyages out there, discovering new things and new places and scientific discoveries, biological discoveries, and ecological discoveries, and it's wonderful. And there's probably more to discover, sure. But that voyage inside, let's go on that. Let's start discovering the real, true me. And I think coronavirus pandemic has given us that insight, where we were forced to go quiet, to close down the rest. And lots of people speculated about this. We've been forced to close down industries, countries, borders, everything. We've created boundaries between people, between nations, between provinces, between families. Thank goodness for digital, you know, platforms like this that allowed us to continue functioning to some degree. But as we've been in our own homes, you know, I interview a CEO who's got a big business in Mauritius, and he hasn't seen his family since January because of how all these things have panned out. That's how long, you know, that's 7 months soon. 6, 7 months. So he's been on his own, running his business, but discovering himself and being alone a lot. And so there's another clue for us. This incident, this thing has given us a clue that we've got to focus on the individual more. When you train your leaders, forget leadership development, park that. Find the best possible ways. Don't just make it a little module in the beginning of a program of 6 modules. Discover yourself, 2 days program, ask you what your values are. No. We need more than that. We need an intuitive discovery inside. So plan all your leadership development program in a sense. Continue the functional technical training, and then help every individual build their foundation so that they can absorb that pressure. And if we did that in organizations, if we did that in our political parties, we would see a different world.
That's an amazing closing statement. Help every individual on their individual pathway to self-discovery. Thanks a lot, Adriaan, for this wonderful conversation. I hope we meet again, and all the best on your personal journey into the future.
Luke, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the spontaneous conversation. And yeah, really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
All the best. Bye-bye.